Hello and welcome to another brand new episode of What the FinTech, the podcast from the team behind FinTech Futures and the Banking Technology magazine. My name is Cameron Emanuel-Burns, a reporter at FinTech Futures, and for this episode I'm delighted to say we are joined by industry expert Clare Pearson. How are you, Clare, and welcome to the show?
I'm good, thank you, Cameron. Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I think it would be great to start off with, Clare, if you could tell us a bit more about your current positions and also about your prior experience. In particular, it would be great to hear about your work within FinTech and at the PSR.
Yeah, so my career's been quite varied, Cameron, in terms of different kind of expertise within payments in particular. So it's probably about 15 years worth of payments expertise altogether. Worked in kind of tier one banks. I've worked on the risk perspective. I've worked on operational processes, setting up teams, setting goals, objectives, new target operating models. I've spent some time in consulting. So I was consulting with some companies who needed to attach payments and have payment acceptance. So on the e-com side of the business as well. And then what else have I done? Oh, so much. There's so much in there, but actually tier one banks, massive projects and programs. I've been involved in industry leading programs such as confirmation of payee, the check and credit clearing, which was removal of ICS as a program into digital check. So lots of digital transformation, lots of things to big banks kind of moving from legacy tech into new architecture as well. And with the PSR, more so recently with FinTech. So I work at Fnality International, and Fnality are a DLT blockchain payment solution. So I work with them in terms of bringing that almost from a POC to live perspective of where we are now. With the PSR and having my involvement, it definitely helps from a regulatory perspective, I think, there, because actually being able to be a really insightful panel member, it helps to shape basically the future of payments in the UK. So what happens on the regulatory landscape? How do we move that into innovation, and how do we bring new solutions to the market and new things live as well? So yeah, very good balance, I think, of regulatory background, lots of expertise on programs and lots of operational expertise, and predominantly in payments. Yeah.
Super, thank you. And could you share your thoughts actually quickly about what's happening with the PSR, the news that the government it's kind of amalgamating with the FCA and what's happening there with the PSR? Are you able to just give us your brief thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. And actually, at the moment, it's pretty much a status quo. So it's continuing as is from a PSR perspective. The strategic goals and objectives are very clearly defined for the PSR and always have been from a payments perspective. They're part of the FSA originally. So that broke out into the PSR to really focus on payments as a competition regulator and innovation regulator. And that still remains the focus. So although it will be absorbed back into the FCA, there's very clear definition between the FCA of conduct, supervisory responsibility, license approvals, and actually this balance of competition and innovation from the payments perspective. It still remains a top priority in terms of the FCA and their goals. And also we saw open finance and open banking, which I've also worked in at some point during my career, was also moved within the FCA as well, right? So we had this shift of kind of that. It's a blend of a regulator who is really responsible in terms of supervisory and conduct, and we absolutely have the right players in the ecosystem that don't cause risk. But then there's how do we balance that with the new solutions and competition and innovation? And I think that works really well. So yes, they will be coming together at some point. At the moment, it's very much like as is. So my work as a panel member is to help shape and inform from an industry perspective, bring those industry views into what we think would be the next kind of thing on payments. So that still remains a real key focus. And it's actually probably one of the trends we need into in the topic of payment trends as well, Cameron, because NPV is a big part of that. So the National Payments Vision is actually looking at, we've had NPA for how many years now? NPA was NPP, I think first, was new payments provider, whatever it was, NPSO, I think originally. Then we went to NPA. And now we're NPV, right? So we've got all these acronyms, which is another thing in payments we absolutely love. But NPV is about looking at that vision and what do we do in the UK now to actually be at the forefront of payments and technology, but also inclusion, and actually making sure consumers and corporates and small businesses get what they need from a payments perspective. And actually, when you look at payments, even I'll take a step back here, but even payments, because we're in the industry, we focus a lot on payments, but actually as a consumer or as a small business, do they really care? Probably not, because it's about moving money. How do I make sure it gets there on time and is delivered? Yeah. So if it's a seamless experience, that's what they're looking for. They don't particularly go, oh, I'll choose a payment. Yeah. So I think we get caught up a little bit in payment methods. And actually, it's not really about that. It's about what am I paying for? Because it's the experience you're purchasing or what you're doing as part of that. And I think that's a change in lens from a customer experience perspective. That NPV for me really needs to focus on, like, what is that experience? How easy is it to access payments? How easy is it for me to use payments? It shouldn't be a chore. It should be really seamless. Yeah. And then also protected. So the other big focus for me within there is consumer, making sure that when something goes wrong, everyone talks about happy path on payments, but what happens when it goes wrong? How do I get my money back? How do I ensure that I'm covered and I'm okay? So that's also a big focus, I think, for NPV, linking quite nicely into the PSR there as well, in that they're heavily involved across the FCA, also with the Bank of England and also with HMT from a Treasury perspective aligned. And I think that's the first time we've seen multiple kind of regulators or regulated bodies working together to kind of achieve this. So I think it'll be really exciting for NPV. It's that pivotal moment for me. I think it's now. We need to do something now. And actually, we need to deliver on it now as well. We've talked about it for a long time on NPA. So how do we ensure that what we say we will deliver and actually the outcomes for the UK is in a good place?
Well, thank you so much for that. I know I just threw that at you last minute, but you've hinted at what we're talking about today, thankfully for me. So I guess we should just let the listeners know that in this episode, we're going to be discussing around digital payment trends currently going on, what Clare feels are the number one out there at the moment, but also a bit similar to what if our listeners may have heard a few weeks back in our recent conversation with Subu from Wells Fargo. I'm going to ask Clare about her experience acting as one of our judges, and of course then finishing with our infamous FinTech jail. But yes, let's get into it. We've started already looking at some of these trends. But yes, the floor is yours. We've had a little look over some of the ones we were going to talk about today. But for you, what is your number one, or what's right up there for your payment trends to look out for going into this year?
Payment trends. So I think digitally, we've talked about digital transformation there, but the rise of kind of digital wallets has been at the forefront of that. And we saw players such as Apple Pay and Google Pay, thanks to an FC, big tech, it's huge. And we've seen that as a payment method grow globally for many consumers. And I think the latest figures are around 20% annually, that growth year on year, mainly driven by obviously those big tech players. And I think for them, there's a whole play around having that ability to be able to transact really simply. For them, it's technology focused. I still feel from an Apple Pay, I know everyone talks about this in the industry, but do Apple Pay really want your bank data? Possibly, but what do they want that bank data to explore what you could potentially afford on an Apple device? Definitely. Right. So there's a definite market, I think, there from a big tech perspective. But people say, like, would they get a banking license? Would they look at financial instruments? Maybe, but I don't think it's their key focus, just in my opinion anyway. But the wallets has kind of helped grow that. And we've seen around the world different methods of different wallets. Also, if you take out Apple Pay and Google Pay out of the equation, lots of other alternative payment methods that operate on this wallet-based system. So that's like a store of funds. There's different methods of digital wallets. You have like a pass-through method, or you have a prepaid, which we're familiar with, prepaid cards and so on. But the growth, I think, generally has been in countries that are so used to this in terms of wallets, and having that normal solution there for them is normal to pay and use that method. And then the other thing I would focus on is account to account. So account to account payments, we're expected as part of NPV, actually, seeing NPV as one of the items definitely to focus on to unlock some of the value and ability in the UK to be able to make payments through account to account solutions. We saw it heavily from an open banking perspective, and obviously with the implementation of APIs, having the ability to be able to transact. But the next step is ability to transact with POS. I think for me would be the big unlock. It's like, okay, we can send money account to account online or on our app and so on. But actually, I think that would be a real opener, is actually, can we pay at the point of sale, so at the till, using our bank account? And I think other countries do this. We've got the likes of Ideal in the Netherlands, that predominantly it's the main payment method in the Netherlands because they've adopted it. So they're so used to that from a behaviour perspective, less so much on cards. They're more used to having Ideal as a payment method at the till. So you just select it and you pay by your bank and that is all done. I think in the UK, because we're very different in our behaviour and very cards focused, that's going to take a little bit of time to get used to having account to account as an option. And yeah, we're not there yet, but that's definitely, I think, I'd like to see, because the reason I say that is because there's lower fees there from a merchant perspective. So the cards predominantly, there's a lot of scheme fees and interchange and so on that sits in the cards world from a network perspective. Actually, merchants will be paying those fees. But from a merchant unlocking that, actually then from an account, it could actually lower some of those transaction fees. So equally from a customer being really easy to use, but from a merchant, there's got to be the benefit for them to actually want to offer that as part of the service of the till as well. And then the brand, obviously we talked about, the brand needs to be recognisable and easy to use as well there as well. So I think with the commitment being in the MPV to essentially look at the main goal to offer a different way to pay, that will definitely be an opener, I think, in terms of trends. And then the other part of that is what happens when it goes wrong. Again, my head is linked to this consumer and liability. What do we do if there's fraud? And how do we ensure that money is being able to be recoverable if it goes wrong? Account to account uses the FPS, uses faster payment service. So there are elements within FPS that need fixing. I think we're all cognizant of that, the fact that the liability needs to be looked at. And those things, when they go wrong, how do we return? And we've seen that through the app scam work that the PSR has been doing around ensuring that our consumers are protected. So I think that's still a key focus. And we need to have a look at that first before we then go account to account now live on point of sale, because otherwise we'll compound an issue and actually we could, it could escalate even more into an app scam position then as well. So I think there's certain priorities definitely that will sit within MPV as well as part of that work.
Super, thank you for that. And certainly an area which I think is becoming increasingly expected by a lot of consumers. I know I am and one of them. But this idea of cross-border and real-time payments, we take it for granted in some regards. But yes, what are your thoughts on that going forward?
Yeah, and we've just seen, actually, I think yesterday I shared on LinkedIn, Project Nexus is going live. So cross-border real-time payments, it has always been difficult, right? Because it's always been through a solution that was defined to be settled later, right? So it's like T+1, T+2, T+3, T+4. So there's transaction times plus a day. So we're kind of used to seeing that old correspondent banking model in play, and it has difficulties associated with it from a cross-border for the real-time position. For real-time has been really hard to achieve because there are different parts of that journey along the way. So a correspondent, the bank sends it in the UK, might send it to a bank in Asia Pacific, who then send it on to an intermediary from a correspondent perspective as well. So it's always been difficult to trace, and the time has always been really slow historically on cross-border. That's changed in that time. So that's going back a few years now. And where we are now with some of the solutions that have been put in, like Swift GPI and so on, it allowed that traceability of the payment, but also the speeding up of that payment. And actually, I think where we are now, there's a lot more happening in the real-time space. As I just mentioned, Project Nexus, which, if you're not familiar with, was a project between 5 central banks, was looking at exactly that, being able to interlink a domestic system to a domestic system in each country. So there's 5 central banks that are involved. So the Bank of Thailand, as an example, could link their domestic system into Singapore, and then they could cross. So it is typically cross-border, but actually it's linking to domestic systems. So it becomes much quicker and much simpler. I'm sure there's a lot of complexity involved in the beginning to be able to understand the program of linking those together from an integration point of view. But actually, from a customer perspective in that area especially, we have lots of people who move countries, lots of people who pay and go cross-border, even for work, right? Even on a daily basis, they will go across different countries. So I think having that ability definitely opens up the real-time position in terms of being able to be achievable. And then we've seen the regulatory aspect is it also needs solving, right? This is a big part of the regulatory piece because the regulated support needs to be there. That traction needs to be there to define exactly what we're trying to achieve on the landscape in terms of the real-time offering. In Europe, we've seen it recently. So we've seen this whole EPI piece, which I think is this year. So that's due to 2025, which will be, again, instant payments in different countries. How do we bring that together into a proposition that actually can work across border as well? So there's lots happening. We've seen global adoption like PIX in Brazil, UPI in India, all kind of instant payment systems that we're all familiar with. But I think the key there is interoperability. I think the word is used collectively, but actually, how do we link these systems together? And is that the right thing to do in certain places and certain jurisdictions when the regulatory landscape might be slightly different? So we have to get past that as well. I think understanding what it is now and what's achievable is a big focus, but also for corporates as well. So I know we focused on consumer there and being able to send money to someone in Australia, whatever that is from a cross-border perspective, but actually from a corporate perspective, I think that'll unlock so much value because actually their position in terms of clearing, liquidity and access to capital can be so much improved if their real-time position is actually showing effectively. So yeah, I think there's levels of compliance and currency conversion and integration. There's so much I think to look at, but we know we've seen the traction on that. So I think that's another key trend for me. And I'm sure we'll continue to see that for the rest of the year as well.
Yes, super. Really interesting that, especially the different work that's going on, the different projects. I see a lot actually happening in Asia specifically on this. But moving on to tokenization, how do you feel that's going to expand and grow within payments this year?
I think it is, and it already has, right? So I think from a security perspective, it's a game changer. I think the ability to be able to replace card details with unique kind of tokens and algorithm-based tokens to help prevent fraud and data breaches, I think is key. So we've already seen that with the card networks. They're already on that journey at the minute in VCN. So the virtual card numbers were the first part of that, moving physically away from the PAN as we historically, I'm showing my age there, and I historically too many years in the payments industry because we had the old long PAN card numbers, which going back before POC2 and before we had any kind of systems, they were just open, right? So it's about preventing, I think for me, and actually how do we prevent fraud within that tokenization and actually the flexibility. It's really easy to stop something and start again if there is a potential fraud on a card. In the past, you'd have to then reorder a card, wait for it to call 5 days from your bank to be sent out, and you'd be lucky if you could use a transaction in the meantime. So it's getting a lot better in that tokenization, I think, from the way our information's stored and the way the card details are stored into a token now means it's basically destroyable and start again. So actually you're protected because actually you could then have a tokenized value, tokenized card in some respect that could sit as a virtual card behind the scenes that can be interchangeably started again. Yeah. So from a fraud perspective, I think for me, that would be the biggest play there as well. And also to help scale banks as well, because they've got the regulatory issues as well and varying levels of compliance and currency and so on. So I think it would help them to scale, reduce integration on some of the platforms as well for them having this tokenized ability. And corporate users as well would actually have less clicks from a perspective of when you go to pay as well, because actually it's already stored in the token behind the scenes. So I think that would be a focus as well, yeah.
Super, thank you. And I guess I'm going to open this up to you now. Any other trends that you wish to bring up? Any other areas that you want to discuss?
Yeah, so the biggest thing, I think, Cameron, for me is cards. Everyone focuses on the new way of payment trends, the new way, which is definitely a thing we should focus on from an innovation perspective. But I don't think cards are going to be disintermediated anywhere. I think generally in the UK, we're so card, I'm talking about the UK in particular, but we're so card heavy. We're so reliable on an Apple Watch or contactless in our phones now on the devices. That I don't think it's going to go anywhere anytime soon. I think the recent figures were around 44% of transaction value in store is through NFC, is through using our phones and devices. So it's an easy tap we've become used to, right? So I don't think that behaviour from a UK perspective is changing. I think it will increase in terms of how we then operate with that. We're so used to having that, not putting card numbers in and so on. I mean, how annoying is it when you sat on a train and you go to purchase something and you're on an e-com site, you're like, oh, really want that? And then it goes, oh, you need to put your card details in. You're like, oh, no, because you just don't have them on you anymore, right? Or you've got to go on your app and start looking for the card details to then copy and paste it. It's just really like, and not long ago, that would have been normal, right? So if you go back 5 or 6 years, that probably would have been normal. We would have pulled our card out, entered the details in. And actually that's gone away now because we've got so used to having this kind of embedded experience that actually we want that there and actually we want this seamless quick tap. Done. I'm on the train. I've ordered it. I know it's coming in 2 or 3 days time or whatever. So I think that's definitely where the card play happens. because of that behaviour that we already have and the speed of being able to do it. We're so busy in our daily lives now. We do have devices. We're sat on them pretty much a lot, right? Our phones or iPads and so on. So yeah, we're used to having that ability to be able to just pay for something. And again, I know I said this at the beginning of the podcast, but actually it's the experience for me. So what am I buying? And what is it I'm really excited about buying at that point? If that's a new dress, a pair of shoes, I don't know, a new phone, whatever it is, right? Or a holiday, something you're invested in. It's not about the payment I make. It's about what am I actually purchasing and how do I do that to make sure that it's secure and I get what I need and it comes on time and my delivery is going to be at my door. So from a consumer perspective, I think that's the kind of key focus is the speed and reliability. And then the other one, which we haven't really focused on, is cash. So cash, we know it's in decline consistently year on year. However, we have seen a small resistance to cashless, to becoming cashless in the UK. And we've seen lots of small businesses advertising their preference to accept cash. And lots of them, whilst I can see their point, because they're thinking it's cash in the tail, I'm not paying any kind of card fees or scheme fees or interchange fees in that. But actually the cost of cash to process is quite high. So for small businesses, understanding when they have to then transport that cash, so the first aspect is security, they've got to do their banking and take it to a post office now, probably because there's not many high street banks they can bank it with anymore. So, a local post office are going to go out way 2-3 miles, whatever that is, drive there, then bank it, and then have to wait, and then they get charged on a business account for actually processing the cash as well. So I think we forget that sometimes when we say, oh, we're paying all of these card schemes, we're paying all of these fees. The correlation of what they spend on cash is probably higher than that in terms of the cost, the actual true cost of cash. Now, I think from a global perspective as well, we've seen cash it is predominantly used in the likes of Colombia, Mexico, even Spain, we saw through COVID. And the Nordics is a big kind of topic for me, having worked at a Swedish bank previously, predominantly in cashless as a society, but actually they've also started to use cash in certain businesses as well. So we've seen a lot less in percentage, but has it gone away? No, it's definitely still around. And I think it will continue to be still a method of payment that we need to have access to. So we need to provide people in the UK who are used to that method and have those means. They're paid in cash, they pay by cash, they have access to cash, and actually we continue to provide that to them as well. I think from an inclusion point of view, that's really a key point for me, is that we don't remove something just because we think it's a trend, that actually that we can see is still being used effectively in the UK.
Thank you so much. That is truly really fascinating to hear all your insights there. I think we need to now move on to part 2 of the episode, which, again, we're going to be leading straight into your insights here and what experience you have as being a judge.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's about 4 or 5 years now, Cameron. I can't actually remember when I started, but I think it must be coming up to that. And I was asked to look at PayTech originally from a submissions perspective, to actually look at the awards and actually work out from a business perspective what the kind of new innovative solution, what was on in the payments world, right? Which is really exciting because actually it was my world and I'm like, oh, let's see what's coming next. So I think it's about 4 or 5 years, but yeah, definitely been involved. And then that progressed, so it was PayTech originally. And then the team came and asked and said, actually, from your banking experience, having worked in Tier 1 banks, would you be interested in looking at some of the banking tech as well? And actually some of the solutions that are being proposed there as well. I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because again, some of it links into payments, but some of it is a wider bank ask around deposits and lending and so on. So it gives you that wider lens of actually what's due to come or what's about to land, and actually some really good solutions that you could think, okay, I can see where that would definitely fit in from a market perspective. So that's the reason I got involved, Cameron, as well, because the innovation is really exciting. It encourages growth and the influence that we can see, that the shape of the industry is almost informing the exciting propositions we see coming. I think it's a long process, by the way, so I don't think people realise that actually from a process point of view, process-wise, it starts from an application. So obviously the company has to submit a whole application that goes with that, with all of the documentation that comes with that. So that would include all the solution design, all of their brands, the websites, anything they've done on a particular project, all of the detail about what they achieved from that project, the goals, the objectives. And then once they're ready, we as judges then get to review that. So we have a portal that we'd log into, as you probably know, and then we spend quite a lot of time actually. And I'm quite proud of that I actually put that time aside, because I think it's really important to have the fairness across the submissions. So I dedicate that time. I have my own mechanism of scoring it on a spreadsheet and actually delve into the solution. So I also research the company. So I look at their recent kind of PR, I look on Google, I look on LinkedIn, what have they posted recently? And also on the solution, is there someone out there on the market that's doing very similar from a competitive perspective? Is it unique or is it already out there? So those types of things, I really do have a bit of delving for the weeks that it takes. And it does take quite a bit of time in terms of personal time to kind of look through and assess them fairly as well and benchmark them in that perspective. And then for me personally, I'm very nosy on the technical solution, the design, having worked in the roles like I have done. I'm quite visual end to end. So I like to see how they've implemented and what challenges did they face and actually how did they solve those challenges, and really give me that detail. So rather than going, okay, this is my submission, there's a fancy front end, I'm like, okay, so how does it work? How does it operate? How did it solve a problem, whether that's for a consumer or whether that was something for an environmental issue or so on. So I think that's really important. And then it gets shortlisted from there. So once we've done all of kind of our assessments, they go back to FinTech Futures to look at that shortlist. And then we wait. Obviously, we wait for the awards then. And then the awards events are also really good because you get to meet your fellow judges, you get to meet the submitters, the industry from a networking perspective as well. So just having that time to actually celebrate and recognise achievement for the people receiving the awards as well is equally satisfying. I think being able to see ones you have voted for and then they win and you're like, oh, wow, that's amazing. So yeah, it's having the ability to be able to experience that, I think, is equally exciting as well. It's not the important bit, but it's nice. Yeah, it's nice at the end to be able to see it come to fruition.
It must be nice, say, when you've done all that research into a company, maybe you've put them forward or maybe not, but then to actually see them at the event, perhaps go speak to some of the founders or whoever about, because as you just said, you dedicate so much time to actually researching the company. Now you're putting almost a face to the name, as it were, and you get to have a bit more insight by actually discussing with them exactly their thoughts about their different processes or whatever it may be.
Yeah, definitely. And we do, from a judge's perspective, like we do go mingle. We're like, oh, we saw that one. Do you remember that submission? So we do, and we go and chat. And there's lots of people who've come up afterwards and thanked for our involvement, or we've had a chit chat around something else they're thinking about. So it might be they've submitted this part, but actually, since they've submitted, they've now thought about X, Y, Z. So some of those conversations can be also like further developments for them as well in terms of what they want to do next. So yeah, it's really good. It's really good to have that in person as well.
And I guess finally on this, is there any areas right now that are really intriguing you that you're hoping to come up in the process? Or if you were a startup now, what would you be looking at? What really does intrigue you?
Do you know what? There's so much out there, I think, Cameron. I think anything that's unique and solves a genuine problem for me. There's a lot of focus on fraud at the minute because we know from a system perspective, it's open to fraud, and cybersecurity is the other big focus. So how do we solve the problem? And I think that's, for me, it's not really a certain theme or topic or trend. It's have they focused on something day to day? There's something in our daily lives and they have identified a gap. And I think that's really clever when you've seen this on a daily basis and you think, why don't we just have that? And then someone's gone and thought and actually put it into fruition and made it happen. I think for me, genuinely solving the problem. And then the delivery of that, actually the delivery element, it's actually being put into a live position and is actually solving a problem, especially if it's something on the environment side as well. I've seen some which have been really like amazing submissions and you see it come to life and you're like, whoa, yeah, actually solving the issue. And essentially someone's daily life has improved because it's been solved by having that solution available. So I don't think there's a particular theme or trend. It's not like I would focus on one. I think sometimes it's really quite funny because as entrepreneurs, some people are really entrepreneurship, aren't they? They're really like thought focused and the daily thing is like, oh, okay, this doesn't work. Let me go and solve and fix that. Yeah. So I think that is the exciting bit that I like to see is like someone solve that problem.
Super, that's great. And I guess finally, any developments that you yourself are working on or anything you're excited about in the industry right now?
Industry, I mean, there's loads of the trends we've talked about there, and I think being able to shape NPB will be a big part of that. For me personally, because working on a DLT blockchain solution, I think is also really the exciting part. How do we grow that as a business and actually the solution itself? Because it's DLT, it's blockchain, and actually from a payments perspective, that's new. So there's no one else really doing what Fnality does. I think that's the kind of key lead that we have at the moment. Understanding that and the complexities that come with that is equally challenging if you're not used to looking at that technology and seeing exactly how it performs and what it does in a payments world. So we've also got that learning and kind of educational side of what is possible using different technologies within payments as well. So I think we're at that pivotal point for us in terms of being live already with the Bank of England. It's using central bank money. No one else is in that position right now. So we have this real advantage. Yeah, it doesn't mean it's easy, by the way, because the regulatory landscape, it's quite difficult. One, that you're doing something new that's out of the norm. And two, it's like the payments world generally is used to seeing ABC, and this is how we operate. And we're going, actually, we're doing DEF. So it's understanding the differences, but how do we solve? We're still solving the problem, but how do we solve that with the education along the way? I think for us, it is fairly significant. The regulatory landscape, we are solving for that at the same time because of that history and the blueprint we already have with the Bank of England being live as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Claire, for chatting with us today. To finish the episode, we have our infamous FinTech Jail, where we ask for an industry term, buzzword, or trend that you have seen or simply just heard enough of and want to get rid of. Of course, you can also advocate to free one of the previously incarcerated terms. But yes, what will your selection be this week, Claire?
The selection for me it was really easy, this. It's use cases. So how many times I hear the word use case, right? In the industry, in payments, we've got a use case. And I'm like, do we? Right, we're solving for use cases. I hear this all the time. I'm like, but it's a new product design, right? We're talking about a new product design. So do we have anyone use it when it's a use case? No, it's that pre-design. So unless they're actually using, we don't know how they're going to engage. So we talk about use cases and I'm like, but it's not yet, is it? So the case study it will become, but actually it's a new product, new inception, new proof of concept, whatever we're building, whatever you want to call it, it is that solution for someone to engage in an early prototype. That's what we're building, new product design. But everyone uses it like, our use case is this and our use case is that. And I'm like, yeah, really? We're just solving this. So that's the word I would definitely put in jail because I must hear it about 15 times a day, Cameron. At that point, I'm like, well, what are we doing? What are we actually doing? And what are we trying to solve? For me, is more important than the words we banter about. I have got a second one if I'm allowed it, though.
Yes, no, go ahead.
That'd be cheeky. So the second one is hyper-personalization. And that's another word I hear, again, from a product design perspective, tailoring solutions. So tailoring solutions, absolutely, I'm all for. But hyper-personalization is down to the level of you or I choosing something that a company's going to design for us. I don't think we're there in that respect. I think actually from a personalization, definitely tailoring our behavior or tailoring the way we interact on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. Oh, yeah, I totally get that. But when we're purchasing something from a payments perspective, hyper-personalization doesn't really exist because we have this list of payment methods and that's what we can interact by. And we don't even choose that, right? We're consumer, we just want to pay it. Which rails it goes by and so on shouldn't even be our concern, right? So I think hyper-personalization for me is the other one. It's definitely, I've heard it recently. I'm like, oh, it's like facepalm moment. Yeah, so if we could also put that in, that would be amazing.
Absolutely. Well, great choices. I'm really glad I didn't fall foul of saying use cases on this episode. I think I was very close a few times, so thank goodness I didn't.
Almost there, weren't you?
Yeah, I'm very glad I avoided that. But yes, well, thank you again so much, Claire. That brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for providing us with your insights. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you. It was amazing, and thank you for inviting me. Thanks, Cameron.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you so much to Claire for joining me. As for FinTech Futures, you can find us online at fintechfutures.com and be sure to follow us on LinkedIn to keep up to date on the latest FinTech news. If you like this podcast and our other episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, or your favourite podcast service to get notified about future episodes. Thanks as well to Arama for editing this podcast. You can check them out at arama.tv. And as always, thank you everyone for your support, and we'll see you soon for another episode of What the FinTech. But until then, goodbye.